Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Apologies that I'm a minute late. I must have come down with spring fever. I was out looking at my raspberry bushes. So it is May 25th. It's 8:30. This is our regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. First on the agenda is administrative approval of marijuana licenses. Nanette, I think I ask you this question every time. Do I need to call public comment?
Nope, it's just administrative.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I read the licenses. I have no problem. My note staff recommends approval, and I'm fine with that. So the next thing on the agenda is public comment. If we have anyone who's here who wishes to make a public comment, click raise hand. We'll bring you over. Okay, seeing none, I'm closing public comment. And now we can get to the, go ahead, Peter.
Commissioner Marlin, just one change on the agenda. I noticed at the end of the agenda, there's a work session to consider extending the COVID emergency declaration. I believe that's supposed to be next week that we will be having that work session. And then should the board want to bring it back, we would bring it back the following week for approval. It's up to you whether you do want to have it today. We're ready to just comment on it, but if not, we thought it would be for next week.
When is the expiration?
June 9th. So we have 2 more meetings prior to expiring.
So you were thinking the work session on the 1st and should we choose to renew it, the renewal on the 8th?
That's correct.
Can I just interject? Are you guys going to be here on June 8th with the CCI conference? I just want to make sure that we have a quorum on that day before I start putting stuff on that day.
Well, and that's a very good point. So in that case, why don't we do the work session today anyway, just to be safe, so we have some direction from the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's a short day anyway, and I've got a hard stop at about 1:15. Actually, I'll need to put on a clip-on tie for testimony. So maybe 1 o'clock, run upstairs and get ready to go.
And Peter, you want me to have that on next week too, just as a, okay.
For next week, it should be an action item.
Okay,
Thank you.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Keeping us pointed in the right direction here. So then the next thing on our agenda is quarterly update with the Jefferson Center for Mental Health. We have Kiara Kunzler here, their CEO, and Kara Campbell, the Mountain Communities Coordinator. What do you have for us?
Hello, commissioners. Thanks for having us here today. Commissioner Marlin, it's great to see you again, and Commissioner Wheelock, it's nice to meet you for the first time. We had a board meeting last night, and Commissioner Wood joined us briefly from Nicaragua, so we were a bit jealous not to be there with him, but I bet you are too. But you're here holding down the fort, so we are happy to be joining you today for our first time with the Board of County Commissioners, and are looking forward to making this a regular forum for you to ask questions, for us to give updates. So please give us guidance today if there's more information that you'd like us to come prepared with for the next time, and we can tailor that presentation to meet your needs. So we are just really fortunate to have great partnerships in Clear Creek County. We've been having regular quarterly meetings with a number of community partners, and that group continues to grow, including Sheriff Albers, who I see on the call today as well, has been an incredible partner with us. And we just met Sarah Casano, the new director of DHS, which was fantastic. We're thrilled to be able to work with her moving forward as well. Hi, Sheriff. So I just wanted to start off with a little bit of data, and Commissioner Marlin, I believe I sent this to you a while back, so hopefully you have that, but I'm happy to send it again to this whole group. And it's a little bit outdated now, so we're about at the right time to start pulling that data again. But in the last fiscal year, we served 730 individuals in Clear Creek County. That's about 7.5% of the population in Clear Creek. And that number was slightly down from the prior year of just about 13 or 14 people less in this past year, primarily due to the pandemic, and we had fewer new clients enrolling with us. However, the total service volume was up pretty significantly over this past year. The number of services was around 6,000 services in terms of the total volume. Most of those services are individual therapy, but there's also intakes and assessments and prescriber services and medication management, as well as prevention, education, and outreach, which primarily happens in the schools. So we're really proud of the growing number of services that we're providing in Clear Creek. We see an upward trend over the past 5 years, and continue to seek ways to support Clear Creek and our community and our clients there. We have also added over the course of this past year a new position that is dedicated to Clear Creek and Gilpin counties. That's our crisis services specialist, which lives in the mountains and can respond very quickly. Her name is Carrie Lindberg, and I know she has spent a lot of time getting to know the sheriff's office and deputies, and has had some really positive outcomes of her being more of a local presence. She is in addition to our 24/7 crisis services, which are available around the clock, but that just requires a call to our crisis center and a mobile response that can take a little bit longer than if Carrie is up here able to respond. So she's always backed up though, so you have 24/7 support in that area. Our mobile medication assisted treatment program is another newer addition to our mountains, and I would say is just kind of ramping up seeing more people for the first time. We've been parked all around Clear Creek County. It has a beloved home in Idaho Springs by the Safeway, and people are starting to know about us more and use that service and resource more, primarily for people with opioid use disorders to receive treatment. They can come, just show up and receive an intake, an assessment, a medication appointment, and linking to ongoing services. But it is also available if someone has a substance use disorder that's not opioid specific. Right now, we're not turning anyone away from that mobile unit, so people are able to just show up and we will connect them to the right resources. And we're starting to see a little more utilization there, but just really trying to get the word out that that's available and accessible in the community. Those are the major updates that I have, but I want to turn it to Kara as well. And then after Kara gives any other program specific updates, I can talk a little bit about what we're looking towards in the year ahead.
Thank you, Kiara. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Those were the couple of the things that are always on my mind to feature recently, as well as when we did the proclamation for May as Mental Health Day. I think that was just a couple weeks ago. Also, Sean had mentioned, and not everybody is aware that we have the virtual services, and we've been offering those since COVID pandemic. It was always our plan to move to partial virtual, but that just launched us into offering services that way. And the good thing about that is that clients in Clear Creek County now have access to basically any staff person throughout Jefferson Center. So there are several things that we didn't offer in the mountains, such as group therapy or intensive outpatient for substance use disorder, or a variety of wellness classes, things like that. So people do have access to those services in addition to seeing us in person, which we are offering some in-person appointments in Evergreen, and then as soon as the collaborative care center is open and we move in, we'll have in-person appointments available in Idaho Springs as well for outpatient services.
Thanks, Kara. And that is where we're headed into the next year, is just making sure that our partners are aware of our telehealth resources, in addition to what we're calling telehealth kiosks. And these are essentially an iPad or a laptop that's set up in a community partner location. in which clients, well, they don't need to be clients, just anyone who happens into that location is able to hop on real time and connect with our team in the moment, receive an assessment or link to specific resources through our navigation team or crisis services through our crisis team. And that is real time available. The only requirements there is that there's some connectivity and that there's a dedicated space. So I know Kara has been working with the schools a little bit on that. Kara, are they implementing that yet?
We talked about kiosks, and I think they just already have their own setup. So students, or they're just connecting with us through their Chromebook. So we ended up not needing to set up kiosks in the school, but they are able to access us still virtually if they need to from different means. And then I believe one of the offices that we're going to have on the second floor at the Collaborative Care Center will host a kiosk. And so for those folks that do not have access to internet, or they're too far out in a place where they can't get it, they can always come in, and if the Collaborative Care Center is open, they'll be able to connect with people that way. We've talked about the library and have thrown around a few other ideas, but I think right now we're just focusing on the Collaborative Care Center, but open to other ideas if people want us to be.
So does that look like, I assume there's some necessary privacy. So does that look like maintaining basically an office space in the Collaborative Care Center that people can just plug into?
And that makes sense. And Kiara, I appreciate your correcting when you said where clients can drop into, because basically, the citizens of Clear Creek County, when they are in need and don't have another avenue, are the clients automatically. So I appreciate that clarification. And I think it's great. It's a great opportunity. Of course, in person's, always best. But to be able to have a way that people can always have, it would be really nice if we could have something like that 24/7. That's a tougher proposition, but if it can be done, if there were a way that something like that could be done, I have no idea how it could, but.
Yeah, well, our crisis services is available 24/7, and they actually can do virtual video sessions 24/7 if the person identifies it as being a crisis. And crisis is identified however the person wants. So we hope that is not only used if someone is feeling suicidal or at serious risk, but if they feel like I need help right now and it's midnight, they can call our crisis line and do a video connection or a phone, whatever they're more comfortable with in that moment.
Well, and the reason I bring it up, what I was speaking to was more the idea of the publicly provided opportunity. The kiosk idea or the office idea or something like that, which of course is a little more difficult proposition to try to have, where somebody can grab something like that. But I mean, over the last few years have become aware so much that, especially in mental and behavioral health crises, having something available right now is key. If you don't, if you're referred to somewhere a week down the line or days down the line or anything like that, the follow up and the follow through is, can be pretty abysmal sometimes. So the key moment is, when you need it, that's when you need it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, I know for myself, if I need a healthcare appointment or a behavioral healthcare appointment, I kind of want to talk to someone in that moment. And sometimes if a couple days go by, I don't need it anymore, or I get busy, or things get in the way, or things get worse for people that aren't able to access it right away. So we do feel like telehealth is a great addition to our in-person services. We have no intention of stopping the in-person services that we do offer. And the vast majority of those services over the many years has been in person. So serving 700 plus people with in-person services, and hopefully more than that growing into the future with the access through the telehealth kiosks to our array of services, as Kara mentioned. So we will have people in the Collaborative Care Center staffing that location, as well as continuing to be in person at the schools. Carrie will continue to be a community presence in person, and then we'll continue to offer linkage through the telehealth platforms to all of our services.
What we're seeing with a lot of our folks is even though we have some in-person available, they're still choosing virtual. So, and that was a surprise to us. We may see it change now that the masks, because that was the big thing that everybody was saying is, I don't want to meet with somebody with a mask on. So now that that's kind of changing, we may see an influx of folks wanting to come back. But overwhelmingly so far, people are choosing to remain meeting this way from their home, a safe place.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kara. Yeah, we did some surveying. Periodically, we do surveys by text to our clients that we have appointments with and ask them which mode of services they prefer. And over the past year, it's been about 60% would prefer to receive ongoing care through telehealth only, through video chat only. About 20% or so choose to receive services through phone only. And then the rest would like a mix of in-person and virtual. There was only a very small portion, I think maybe 10%, that said in-person only, and aren't wanting those other options. So our goal is to have options, is to sort of ask what people are looking for and to have those options available.
And can you restate those percentages? What was the first one again? I heard the 20%. What was the first one?
About 50% choose video chat only.
So
Which, again, this is during the pandemic, so they could change their minds, but.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, that's right. We have to wait and see. That surprises me. I would have thought it would have been a higher percentage than 30 or so for in person. So that's.
Yeah.
I think when it first, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
At first, people were very eager to come back in, but now that this has become such a usual way of interacting, people seem to be getting used to it, and it's becoming a preference. They don't have to worry about childcare. They don't have to worry about gas money to get there. You know, there's a lot of things that make it easier. But we're hearing the same, like, oh, I'd like to come in and see you every once in a while just to, you know, be in the same room with you. But generally, this is much easier for me.
You know,
the thing I noticed was when I was using your services this spring and summer. Pandemic was hard on all of us, right? And the thing that I noticed is that scheduling was a lot more convenient. Therapists, I think, tend to work in a lot of different facilities and travel around a lot, or at least my therapist did. And it didn't really matter where he was, right? So I was able to, if a Tuesday was where I had a half hour, that was where I got what I needed. So I think that might be a piece of it as well. And I want to follow that up with a question, because I think another thing that might be true is we might find that people are able to stick with therapy longer through changing circumstances and keep that relationship. And I don't really know, we have talked on this board a lot about entry into therapy as being a major barrier to people's recovery and you know, getting through their problems. How important is maintaining therapy over a period of time?
That's a great question, and it really depends on the person and their needs. Some people we found, you know, really can benefit a lot from 5, 6, 7 sessions, and that really is enough to resolve the issue that they're presenting with. And other people may come 8 sessions and feel like they're pretty stable, but they want to be able to check back in every month after that, or every couple months after that. And some people with more significant or more complex challenges really do need that ongoing relationship, and we want to be there for them indefinitely, as long as they need that support. Sometimes people are able to transition to lower levels of care. Maybe it's medication, you know, management only, and an occasional outreach from a case manager, and they don't need that intensive therapy. But we're there if they need to step up that care. So it really depends quite a bit on the individual and what they're looking for.
So maybe there's some opportunity there to or not opportunity, but another benefit.
I think what we notice is that when people start feeling a little bit better, they just stop scheduling appointments. So we always like to have that nice kind of wrap up and some closure and, okay, you've accomplished your goals and you're ready to move on, and please reach out if you need to, and here's the plan that you can take with you. Often that doesn't happen. Often people start feeling better and they just kind of stop scheduling. So we are always looking to think about, okay, what's the course of treatment that we think will be beneficial to you? Let's make it to the end of that. Let's have a good closure process and a plan for you to take with you, and then the opportunity to re-engage when you need that again. I think that's the biggest piece of education that we try to work toward.
I'm curious, what are you hearing from your therapists? How is this impacting like their work experience and the sustainability of their jobs?
Thank you for that question. It is, there are multiple answers to that. I think in terms of telehealth, our therapists have really, and I'll ask Kara to speak to this more specifically, but I think in general, our therapists are very pleased with that flexibility that offers, particularly as they're juggling childcare and family and home and during this time. So I think that the flexibility has been wonderful, and Kara can speak to that a little bit more. The other thing, though, the other piece is that it's also been really challenging. Behavioral health work is hard work, particularly when you're working with people with very complex conditions, people involved in criminal justice system, people with substance use disorders, in addition to their mental health concerns, people that have unstable housing or less access to those resources to meet their basic needs. So for behavioral health providers that are working with the most complex individuals and families, this is very, very hard work. And there is a shortage right now of behavioral health providers in general. So we are seeing behavioral health providers choosing to work in less difficult situations, less difficult settings, maybe going into private practice or working in health systems where they can see people more short term. And so we have really been trying to identify how we support people that work in community nonprofit behavioral health. We're really advocating for increasing provider rates through our public funds to supplement the work that nonprofit behavioral health providers do, even paying them above and beyond market value for behavioral health providers to get them to stay in this field and serving people that need it at the most, people with Medicaid, people without insurance, because we really need to strengthen that safety net and we need to incentivize providers to work in this setting. Kara, what would you add about the experience of our clinicians working with telehealth?
Yeah. I think just like with general population, the first few months were difficult, just trying to figure out how we're all going to survive in a different world. And then as time went on, it's a bit of a mix, but some clinicians are really enjoying working from home because they can boost sort of their self-care routine, and again, there's no commute and they're in their own environment. So after a session, they can go outside to their yard and take a walk around the block or a couple deep breaths before they move on to their next task. And moving forward, many of them would I think prefer to do a hybrid model. So what we are suggesting, we're offering to clients is what's working, I believe, best for clinicians as well. So some work from home and maybe coming into the office 1 or 2 days a week, just to get the interaction with colleagues and clients and partners and things like that. But it has been rough. If you're at home all the time and only providing therapy, which is a one-way relationship, so you're giving and focusing on that person and hearing the challenges, they really need a lot of support as well for themselves. So we encourage maintaining really good connections with your social supports, which has been really hard. So yeah, they are heroes through this, for sure.
It's funny, while we were talking, I just had a text from a friend that has a personal issue and a personal problem going on, letting me know that he's got to deal with that problem and wouldn't be able to hook up in a meeting later today. I just
Yeah.
tried to let him know that, you know, life takes a while to smooth out sometimes, and that's sometimes normal.
Absolutely. We all need to connect. I've seen many providers over the years, and anytime you sort of just feel a little off, it's good to go right away to prevent what Kiara was suggesting as it getting worse, you know. So if you can catch them, just like a cold in the beginning, you start treating it early and you'll get better faster.
And appreciate, Commissioner Wheelock, that people are able to reach out to you and let you know what's going on. I think that that's something that we are really trying to educate the community around, about how to be that kind of safe space for people to just talk about their mental health with. And Commissioner Marlin, you know, expressing your use of services over the past year. I mean, these are the things that normalize the conversation, that decrease stigma, and that really allow people to feel comfortable accessing care. And particularly in Clear Creek and Gilpin counties and in our mountain communities, there is a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of self-judgment, potentially judgment of others. Just there are cultural factors about wanting to be independent and wanting to sort of make it on your own without a lot of assistance. And so it's been a struggle, I think, as we've talked with our community partners over the years. How do we educate about and normalize the conversation, and that people can get help early? Like Kara mentioned, I think that's a great talking point to spread out there. If you get help early, then it doesn't need to be an ongoing concern.
I think knowing that there's, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Trail up. I was going to say, just knowing that there's stuff that happens in every house and every life, and to know that, and hearing, and George has heard this a few times because it you know, really touched me a few years ago, and when Karen McNeil Miller from the Colorado Health Foundation was standing on a stage and talked about small towns, small communities in mental health, and that how that destigmatization is one of the hardest things to overcome. And the smaller the town, the more everyone knows everyone. And so, for example, the resource center or someplace like that, well, everybody knows your pickup and everybody knows where the resource center is. So they don't want to see your pickup, and you know, you don't want people to see your pickup in front of the resource center, and to try to get a community understanding that it shouldn't be any different than when you're, you know, in front of the if you park at the dentist office or the grocery store. It's all stuff that is dealing with our needs. And I, you know, as I look back over my life and think about my friends, I know personally the small amount that I have used it, and I have used it, is only because I didn't use it as much as I probably could have and should have to help me out at times. You know, stressful jobs, for example. I'm thinking of first responders. I see, you know, seeing the sheriff over there and recognizing the kind of things they go through in their job, and thinking about what you go through in your job. No one is untouched by, for example, stress alone, and the times it can, you know, make you want to crawl out of your skin once in a while, and everybody can use somebody to talk to. And when you feel it's particularly difficult, that's a really good time to talk to a professional that really understands. It can help you know what's, you know, what feels normal, what isn't, what really needs to be addressed, what's, you know, those kind of things. Just that conversation is huge. And so it's very important. Anyway, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate this element of our public service in our county.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing all of that. We clearly have great leadership in Clear Creek. The way that you all talk about mental health and mental wellness and the importance of that, I think will go and has gone a long way towards normalizing that conversation. You know, speaking of small communities, I spent a number of years, I'm a psychologist as my background, I spent a number of years working in Bailey. And that community, you know, similar small mountain community, easily wrapped around each other if someone was ill or someone was injured or there was a death in the community. People come together, they support each other, they talk about it. But somehow when it comes to a mental health condition or a substance abuse condition, there was that, okay, I need to handle this on my own, or it needs to be private. And I think if we can build on those strengths of smaller communities that can wrap around each other, and really, like you all are saying, just focus on mental wellness in the same way that we focus on any other community need to really come together as a group, the better. Some of the tools that we offer to support that, which I just want to remind folks of, are mental health first aid training. It's an 8-hour, just single day mental health first aid training class. It's available to anyone in the community. We can set up special meetings for certain community groups, organizations. We've offered it for churches and different congregations, and gosh, we've done some up in the casinos. Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that a teach a person how to sort of provide mental health first aid?
Well, kind of, but in a very casual way. So it's really giving anyone the tools to identify when someone that they know may be struggling, and how to talk to that person about what they're struggling with, and then how to get resources, how to kind of link them to resources. So it is kind of mental health first aid for the citizen, for the everyday citizen, so that we all have those basic tools.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and we can do that anytime. So if anyone is interested, if your office or the county is interested, please let us know.
I would love to pursue that, but I have my eyes on the clock, and time really. Oh, and we have until 9:15. I thought we had until 9 o'clock. My apologies.
That's okay. As whatever you need, we're flexible.
George, after this, I can send you some information about mental health first aid and make sure you have the flyers we've discussed to distribute with the group if you'd like.
Yeah, I really would. And I would love to try to, one of the things that's been on my mind, so we know that we have a major behavioral health impact from the pandemic. We also know that we have resources to address impacts of the pandemic. And it's a little bit, I don't know enough about the field to know. My understanding is that it's pretty hard to find good use of one-time dollars in this arena. And so that's sort of a puzzle that sits in the back of my head sometimes. I bet that's a puzzle that's more in the front of your head. What are you guys thinking about how we might use some of this stimulus and relief and recovery money?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was at the Capitol yesterday morning when the governor did his press conference related to the ARPA funds and sort of the state allocation of those. $3.9 billion, a third of which is going to be designated for behavioral health, which is just incredible. I mean, that really speaks to what the governor and his office are hearing around the state in terms of the priorities and the needs. So it was really wonderful to hear sort of the importance of behavioral health in that funding. And we have been thinking a lot about how one-time funds could support the work that we do. And there's sort of two key areas that have risen to the surface. One is continuing some flexible funding for community response. So George, I know that you're aware of our Colorado Spirit program that has rolled out as a result of some of the FEMA funding that came in. That FEMA funding will end, but the ability to use flexible funds for a small team to just engage in community trainings, group sessions, individual brief therapy, working with our counties, our cities, staff who have been sort of during the pandemic on the front lines and increased stress in those roles. So continuing those sort of flexible programs to meet just how do we pull ourselves out of this? How do we transition back? The transition back to our new normal is and can be just as stressful as the transition into the pandemic and through the pandemic. And so some flexible funding there. And there is a vehicle for that, the passage of the Disaster and Emergency Response Bill. Representative Cutter was the prime sponsor on that. And we are thrilled that that sort of offers a vehicle and a place through CDPHE to allocate some funding. It doesn't have funding attached now, but if some of that funding could go into that pot, that could be helpful. The other big piece is provider salaries in nonprofit behavioral health. So the way that, and I won't go into all of these details, but the way that the rate setting process works in Colorado, particularly for Medicaid funds, but also for the Office of Behavioral Health funds, is that it's retrospective. So they take a look at what were the costs 2 years ago, actually, what were the costs 2 years ago, and then they sort of add that to the rates for the current year. So it's always old, it's always outdated. And the increases to provider rates has been historically around 1% a year, which is much, much, much less than people are able to make in the general population. 2 years ago, we proposed to the legislature a 10% provider rate increase to just get up to where state behavioral health employees wages were. That's still about 20% less than market wages if you're working in a healthcare system, hospital system, federally qualified health center even. Those wages are much higher. And we received a 2.5% increase 2 years ago, no increase last year during the pandemic, and then another 2.5% was approved this year. So if you add all that up, we're further in the hole than we were 2 years ago. So what we're really pushing for is a one-time or over the next 2 or 3 years, using that federal stimulus money, an infusion of provider rates specific for providers working in nonprofit behavioral health. Doesn't have to be specifically a community mental health center. We know that there's a lot of other great nonprofit behavioral health providers out there, but how can we support nonprofit behavioral health providers who work with the most complex individuals? And if we can give them a boost in their salaries over the next couple of years with some of the stimulus funds, then that infuses the rate setting process for the future. And we're able to pull down more federal dollars through Medicaid, through the federal match, as well as through the federal block grant. So we need sort of a couple years of infusion into those salaries, and then that will be sustainable through federal funds ongoing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how, I know that, I mean, to be, I don't want to be like overly academic, but labor supply, the number of therapists, the number of people that are entering the profession, I think it's been a problem for a long time. And not just in Colorado, is that correct?
Absolutely. There's more people retiring out of the field than are coming into the field. We work very closely with interns, both at all of the local universities. So we try to hire as many interns as we can, get them engaged in the field, and then support their education ongoing. And that does help with our workforce. But you speak to a really important issue that we need to be as competitive as we can within the existing market of behavioral health providers, but there are not enough. And so that's why resources like telehealth, exploring new text-based models of care that currently aren't reimbursed, but trying to push for some reimbursement of more text-based care, and sort of more group community approaches is going to be really important, because we simply will not be able to meet the need with the existing providers. It just won't happen, at least in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was kind of, I had been fantasizing about, oh yeah, well, we have money, we can just solve behavioral health problems. Not so much. It was just a couple weeks ago, somebody was like, you don't just pull trained therapists out of thin air.
No. And that's, to get a little bit more into the weeds, we are seeing, we've heard over the past couple of years, there are gaps in the behavioral health care system, and we know that there are gaps. I think some of the proposed solutions have been to set up something new. And all that does is is create more gaps over here and create a new system that also will have gaps because there's not enough providers. So now you have two sort of fragmented systems, you know, as opposed to how do we create an interconnected, you know, statewide system that really infuses that system with the supports, and then there's adjacent services as needed. But what we really want to avoid is duplicating or fragmenting further, because right now the goal is to maximize economies of scale, efficiencies that are possible by kind of using existing systems and structures, and incentivizing people to work in the safety net system. So it's a challenge for anyone, and money is not going to solve it alone. But I think money to pay providers to stay in this field and encourage them to come into this field 5 years from now will make a difference. So if they know that they can make money in the nonprofit behavioral health world and do the work that's meaningful and important to them, then they might go to grad school and get those degrees and enter into the field. Right now, you know, going to grad school and getting your master's degree and trying to work in nonprofit community mental health in Colorado, you can't live very easily in Colorado with the increasing cost of living and the salaries that we're able to offer right now. So it's very challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for asking those questions. Those are important questions.
And
Is
I
there
know you, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if there was anything else that you'd like us to speak to or to plan to speak to next time. But I'm happy to answer whatever you were going to ask, George.
I was going to bring up the same topic. We've got a couple minutes left here. And as far as topics, by next quarter, we might have made a little more progress about what we're thinking about with American Rescue Plan money. So there might be some room to talk about that a little bit. And I think I know, this didn't come up today, but I think that you're engaging with the sheriff's offices of Clear Creek and Gilpin to explore a co-responder program. I'd love to hear about that. You know,
Absolutely.
and it's a good time.
Sheriff, are you jumping in there? I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I had somebody in my office. I missed that.
Okay.
I apologize.
Sorry, I thought I heard you talking to the camera silently.
No, I had somebody in my office. I'm sorry.
Okay. Absolutely. We have a meeting set with the two counties to connect with the Jeffco Sheriff's Office as well. They've implemented 4 co-responders in Jeffco through the Sheriff's Office. And so we're exploring whether a joint co-responder between Clear Creek and Gilpin might be of interest to you all, and just to learn from the experience in Jeffco around that. There is added funding for co-responders moving into next year. So that is excellent news, and we would be able to help support that. The sustainability of those programs can be challenging, but at least we know for the next 3 to 4 years we would have funding to sustain that. And hopefully in that time work towards more sustainable funding.
Which is the goal that the DA's office, after that officer involved shooting we had, was the grand jury's goal was to get more mental health. These ladies on here are wonderful to work with.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to that co-care stuff that we can maybe do with Gilpin and Clear Creek. We got to start somewhere, but you know, I just keep trying to remember what the grand jury requested, which are citizens from, you know, Clear Creek County or the 5th Judicial District that see a need. So we need to keep that in the back of our minds.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 9:15. Those are some of the things that are on my mind. What we do when we're doing well is make contact a couple weeks in advance to say, okay, what's on our minds, what's fresh, so that you all know what to prepare for, and we know, you know, what to prepare for and get something out of these. But it's also helpful just to have these regular touch points, I think.
Absolutely. And I can we can put a prompt on our calendar as well to just reach out a couple of weeks before and get those points from you that you'd like us to be prepared to cover. And we'll plan on talking about the recovery relief funds, as well as an update on the co-responder work, because we will have met by then and we'll have some more information there. And then we'll touch base a couple weeks before that. And I can't remember if I have that on my calendar already. Perfect. Thank you.
Beth's got us pointed in the right direction.
Excellent.
Okay, well, greatly appreciate your time and your work. And I think that we are moving to the next thing on our agenda. Randy, would you, before I just cut this off, would you care to have words?
I think, how many did I say so far? It was quite a few, I think.
I lost count, but I don't get that high.
Yeah, that's
I'll count that.
your calculator exploded. I know.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate the time with you and your support of behavioral health in the community, and just really appreciate the ongoing partnership.
Thank
Love
you,
the
Beth.
enthusiasm too.
Thanks.
All right,
Yeah,
have a
thank
good
you for your
one.
time.
Take care.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is county commissioner updates. I have two things on my list. I think there might have been a third, but Randy, do you want to start? Or you
Yeah,
want
why
me to
don't you
start?
go ahead and then I'll bat clean up.
Okay. So I'm looking on my list here. I see broadband update, and I'm going to remember what that's about. I do remember what that's about. Clear Creek Broadband has reached out to ask if we would like to have them do an update on what's going on with the construction or implementation of their land use plan. Of course, there's no action for the board to take, and I think, Peter, you might have, well, you weren't entirely sure we would want to do that, and so you wanted us to talk about it.
That's correct. I just, we had received a request from Clear Creek Broadband to just update the board, but I was told it doesn't relate to anything having to do with the zoning and planning. I'm not really sure the purpose other than to update you on the status of their installations, and they wanted to talk about other projects that they're working on. I'm not sure that that's really appropriate for them to use as a forum. I mean, anybody can come and speak at public comment if they want to talk about that. We certainly couldn't prohibit that, but I'm not sure that we would want board action or board time for just to hear that update, but it's up to the board.
My thoughts on it are that certainly it's interesting, and if we had a spare 15 minutes to hear them talk about the project, that, I mean, just, you know, how's it going, you know, something like that. That said, we're pretty busy, and I know we have a lot of we have some absences among, I've got a, you know, so we're packing a lot of things into some of the weeks as we've had. There's some, you know, Sean's traveling a bit, and I've got a surgery coming up on my knee, and so we're going to miss some slots. And you know, a 15-minute update on the project itself, as far as learning about other things going on somewhere else, I don't know that we would want to burn the time for that, but George may have a different thought about it. So
that's pretty much where I'm at. I am interested. I think that the community was very interested. I think that's an atypical land use case, right? That isn't like, how's the construction of your dream home going, right? It's really affecting a lot of people. So I could lean towards being interested and thinking there might be enough interest in the community that it's worth our time. However, I do want to steer clear. I mean, especially if they're talking about projects that will bring additional land use cases. I'm sure that's registered with all of you already. I think we should steer clear of that.
Right.
So,
Anything we'd be involved. We wouldn't want them to come in and talk to us about anything that would be germane to a later discussion on land use.
yeah. So, I mean, maybe what we could do, Peter, Randy, if you're comfortable, is just ask Beth to, over the next couple of months, maybe just when a slot sort of looks like it's going to show up that, you know, doesn't require us to bend something else. or am I misreading?
No, I think that makes sense. We could shoot for a date in July or even some availability in August. Since Sean is gone, I believe just about most of June, and we do have very tight agendas since then, things will probably start to open up a little bit by that point. So we can find 15 minutes for Stefan to come in and speak, and I'll advise him accordingly as to what the parameters are for any discussion with the board.
Okay. Okay, so then the other thing I have is, Randy, I'm pretty sure you're aware of this. I think you've received some emails too. The St. Mary's community is getting very concerned about some shooting that's going on up there. And it's a very dense community, and people with PTSD and noise complaints. I think I'm bringing, I know you're aware of it. I would like for the board to talk about what we might be able to do. I know one of the options is to go all the way to obtaining the equipment to measure the gunfire noise. Another approach could be to ask our code enforcement officers to go take a look. I know that the sheriff's deputies have taken a look. They think the shooting is safe already. But I mean, this is an issue that I am motivated to try to wrap my head around. I know that oftentimes in county government, you set rules and then you find out it's really hard to enforce them. And I kind of want to crack that nut with this one. So maybe that's just kind of a heads up. And I don't know that, I know we can't really take action here, or.
I would, and Randy, just before you comment on that, because I know you both have brought this to my attention as well, it may make sense to at least have an action session, or excuse me, a work session rather, to discuss this issue and go over what the law is. I'm happy to spend that 15 minutes time. It's obviously a very serious issue, but as you know, is based on advice that I've given you already, our hands are somewhat limited, but it may be worth having that discussion. It seems to be an untenable situation, but there are also some actual concerns with being able to get the measurements of the sound. So we could probably put this on an upcoming agenda sooner so we can give it to the priority that it needs, especially because right now I think it's extremely difficult for those homeowners.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth at a minimum a work session to talk about it more thoroughly. Obviously there are guardrails around what we can even do in terms of laws, but I'd like to know where those guardrails are, because it could be that there are regulations regarding density that we want to look into, and we want to reevaluate that density. And I think it should be, when we have that meeting, it would be nice if it could be informed by the density from our land use department to give us a read on what the density is there and what's been done in some other communities around us. Just a little bit of research on that would be extremely helpful to give us some guidelines about what is within our purview. So some advice on that, particularly with regard to that specific area. And then that could inform I wouldn't want to do special legislation for one neighborhood, but it could inform a discussion about what we do as if there's anything we can do as a blanket ordinance or something, or land use distinction. It might be a process we go through.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're thinking, George?
That's what I'm thinking. And I think a work session sounds great. Amy, you have something on your mind?
Yeah, just to share that James has been experimenting a little bit with a shot detection system in some of the areas where signs and at trailheads get shot up a lot by guns. And it's a I don't know all the details. We can talk about it at a work session, which would be a great place to talk about it, but it's a system that can detect the noise of a gun and instantly make a 911 call. And how useful that might or might not be remains to be seen. Whether that's a good use of a 911 system remains to be seen. There's plenty of questions, but just to make you as commissioners aware that that is a tool that exists, and how that may or may not play in or be useful is a question. But that's something James has been experimenting with or looking into, I guess is a better way to describe the status of that right now. There's some money, there's some costs involved with that, et cetera. And I think there might be systems that have cameras, you know, et cetera. So just to put that in your pipe and smoke it.
I think
I
that's,
suggest that we have that. Sorry, Randy. I suggest that that's part of what we put in our pipe in this work session.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I just wanted to
right.
include that. Make
yeah,
sure you include that piece.
it has, you know, it's a little different than what we're talking about, which is first, which is just what would the rules be if there was any place that we could make any rules that would change, you know, what our abilities are. And then secondly, it has more to do with being able to have a decibel measure that you can level to know when a nuisance complaint is valid, which are a little different than that, but that may have some application that bears, and I agree with George, and so I will stop talking.
Me too. So, okay, so we'll get that on the schedule when we can.
And actually, it may make sense to have at least just do a half hour, or because there's no way we could wrap this in 15 minutes.
Right.
Lawyers talk 15 minutes, you know, just when they say whatever. So you need at
Yeah.
least 10.
The third thing, and Randy, I'm sorry, you probably have stuff. So I'm going to be quick. I think you saw, you might have received, I think I forwarded it. It looks like Senator Bennett's office is doing a process very similar to Jonah Goose's. It actually looks like a carbon copy. I looked at the applications.
Yeah.
For community supported projects. And Peter and I had a little bit of an email exchange, because I think if we're going to direct staff to apply, it has to happen today. And the direction has to happen today. The application is due the 4th. So we could decide, I don't really want to ask staff to pull something like that off in 3 days. Anyway, I think this can be pretty simple, because we have 3 applications that were already completed. The questions are the same. I'm thinking we could really simply just say, yeah, let's put those 3 applications in.
That was going to be my suggestion. Those are our top priorities. We've already determined them. We know we won't get them all funded. I think we should submit the same 3 and then sort it out. If we, you know, if they try to each fund something for us, then we can have that discussion about what it is. And it may be that with the letter, Senator Bennett's office can be informed, you know, that we have submitted those also on the House side. So the same one, so they can talk, you know. And then,
yeah,
and I don't know if it was within regard to this, a few days ago, an email came through about just general priorities with regard to infrastructure and stuff like that. And I made a comment about some things that have to do with I-70, and they weren't meant to supersede these particular, it wasn't with regard to these applications or anything like that. It was just in general that about some stuff we want to make sure is on their radar, the senator's radar.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that one, but that sounds good to me. Peter, do you think we have what we need to go ahead and get those applications into Bennett's office and Hickenlooper's office if Hickenlooper's offering a process?
Yes, it sounds like there's a consensus of the board. Who is the staff member that will be the point person on that? Is that Amy?
Alyssa did it last time, and I did gave her a call yesterday and just said, hey, if we need to get this done, can you do it? She said yes. I know normally we would say, okay, county manager. And so I just want everybody to know that that's like not how I think I should be operating in a period where we have, you know, an active county manager.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it's, again, it's the same, if it's the same application form, literally, I mean, if it looks the same, then it should be kind of a slam dunk.
So, okay, well, Randy, I apologize. I just took up the whole 15 minutes, but that doesn't mean that.
I'll just
what's
be
on-
really quick. Amy's going to give a transportation report coming up. And so that is right now. And so all I'll say regarding transportation is that I, along with some other folks, testified on Senate Bill 21-260 yesterday, and will be testifying this afternoon on Senate Bill 21-238, which is the Front Range Passenger Rail project. And I will be testifying in support, with the caveat that it does get passed with an amendment that was supposed to be added to it yesterday. It gives the I-70 Coalition, the I-70 Corridor, a non-voting seat on the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission to ensure discussions about interoperability and interconnectivity with any future transit systems that come up the I-70 corridor. And that had been turned down a couple times in the past in dealing with FRPR, but there was some really fast shuffling yesterday and a little brinksmanship that happened, and the proponents of the bill in the House agreed to that amendment. So looks like we'll get that seat on that committee. The other thing I just want to say really quickly is that there is if you look around, I think on the county site and on the county website, on the county Facebook page, website and Facebook page, you'll see that there's a webinar that's being put on by the Mr. Coalition for tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, and it is education about missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's connection. It's connection as an example, an egregious example that goes well back in history to the Sand Creek Massacre and the nature of who the victims were of that massacre, and its connection to the meaning of the word currently of that we call S-word mountain. And so it's a good opportunity to just get educated about that. And then just to remind everybody that I think we're going to have that on our agenda to talk about next Tuesday, taking public comment in the morning, and at a special, and then continuing our meeting, recessing until 5:30, so that folks who are at work have the opportunity to come in and offer public comment, where we'll discuss that potential renaming, and that it's not really our decision whether or not to rename and what to rename it, only to offer comment to the state renaming commission and the Geographic Naming Commission, as well as the Bureau of Geographic Names in Washington. And ultimately, it's the Bureau of Geographic Names in Washington that makes the decision. So.
Okay, thank you. Glad we got that seat. Thank you for your work on that. That's one of those, like, just good to have a partner that's getting it done.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of partners. Dylan Roberts from over in Eagle County actually turned into, he played Guido on this one, and made sure that they knew that it was really important, and a bunch of representatives thought it was important to have this on there, and that really turned the table. So
awesome. Okay, well then let's move on. Amy, I see you're up twice here. We've got transportation first.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, these I wanted to offer a couple of what are actually pretty brief updates, and wanted to go ahead and just take the time to offer them. Both of these topics, transportation and the recreation in the outdoors management plan update, are part of our effort to provide regular updates that are scheduled on our calendar, the matrix calendar that you've seen a couple times. So these are topics that come up in rotation, and we want to just kind of follow through on our commitment that calendar implies, even though we might not necessarily have really robust content every single time, just to go ahead and follow through on that schedule, follow through on what that calendar implies, and make sure we're bringing those topics up. So that's why these are 2 15-minute blocks, and hopefully the content will still be useful and relevant. So here we go. The transportation topic has really 2 main things that I wanted to share with you today. One is that Neil Ogden, who is a longtime CDOT person and has been a great advocate for Clear Creek County, has left CDOT. His last day was May 24th, which is yesterday. We are bummed, and it's a loss for us as a county. He's been a great presence at CDOT, a really reliable partner for me personally, to, someone I could always go to and get a great response, and a person that, I just, to just know that they were there was somebody that I felt like, I could trust, and was someone that would respond quickly, and was that I at least understood what he was going to say and do. And so it doesn't mean that, well, we don't know exactly what it means. We don't know who's going to replace him. We don't know who's going to be now in charge of the Floyd Hill project. So the transportation team is going to be meeting to figure out exactly how to respond. We will be, I anticipate, doing some outreach to CDOT to just check in with them and figure out what they can offer us to, who will be our contact person in the meantime. It's one of a series of 3 staff changes really that's taken place in the last year between Steve Harrelson, Vanessa Henderson, and now Neil, who were all 3 people that were pretty tried and true CDOT staff people that had longstanding relationships with Clear Creek County, and they've all kind of moved on in different capacities. So just wanted to share that information and update you on that. And that's pretty much informational. Welcome any input or comments or concerns that you'd like to share. Anything to offer or say?
Just the same thing about Neil. I've worked with him for a long time, and he was really, really, really instrumental in forging with us very collaboratively some of the final outcomes on the peak period shoulder lanes. And it was a couple of years ago, he and I came to an almost immediate conclusion about where it looked like the width of that thing was going to end up in order to really be responsible from a safety standpoint and responsible to Clear Creek County at the same time. And it was just amazing how well he worked with us. I did talk to him yesterday, and he said he's actually not starting out of the job for about 3 weeks. And it sounded like he was still going to be at CDOT.
Oh, okay.
But maybe he's grabbing some vacation time in between. I'm not sure. He'll be working down at Central Federal Lands at FHWA, where my wife works.
Oh, good. Yes. Right. Yeah. The date, May 24th, was in an email he sent to the Floyd Hill PLT. So maybe that's, maybe there's some vacation time in there or something like that. So, but just, wanted to share that news. And that is good news for Neil and for him and his career path, I'm sure, and bad news for Clear Creek County, at least in the short term. And hopefully we'll hear some more information from CDOT about what they are expecting to do in the future soon.
I would like to think that their director is going to find somebody who's very qualified and who wants to embrace this transition from the Department of Highways to the Department of Transportation that we've been seeing go on over the last 10 years or so.
Yes, I would hope so too. That there's a lot of knowledge that will need to be passed on, both from us to this new person and from within CDOT to this new person, to make sure that the wisdom and unique characteristics of the CSS process and its value and from all perspectives is carried over in a way that that is authentic. I think maybe is the best way to describe that. So, okay. And the other topic is I just wanted to also let the board know that a new PLT is being formed around a project to repave a section of US 40 that goes through Empire. And it will also include some opportunities to make some improvements, especially to the intersection of US 40 and a road that's, I think, technically called County Road 257, which is the section of County Road that crosses US 40 just north of I-70 at that overpass. I don't know if they'll be able to, if it's going to include reconfiguring the westbound off-ramp oddity there. There's a lot, that's a very odd configuration, but there's some opportunities there at least to improve some safety issues around that intersection. Also, as US 40 passes through Empire, changing pedestrian crossings, traffic stops and timing through there are all on the table for improvements to the traffic issues of people returning from Winter Park and going up to Winter Park that have some pretty big impacts on the Empire community. So I wanted to just share that information. I am in touch with Wendy Cook, and she'll of course be a member of that PLT. Anticipate outreach to folks like EMS and fire. We'll, be as broad as we can, thinking about who should be on that EMT in terms of community representation, PLT, in terms of community representation. I wanted to just provide an opportunity right now to see if anybody had any concerns at this moment to share, and in the future, if you had concerns to share later, there's ample opportunity, but want to make sure your voices are included in the mix for that PLT and whatever agenda items we might want to try to get onto the table for that project.
Okay. I don't have any concerns. I think we've had good people in the PLT for a while.
I have plenty of other opportunities to express any if I have them. So.
Great. Let's see if I had anything else on the transportation topic. Yeah, I think that is all I had on that topic. And Randy, I was going to offer anytime if you needed any additional time, had any other transportation things you wanted to cover.
No, not really, not right now. It's,
okay.
Floyd Hill is seeking funding, and that will help move that along. And so that's really I won't say a limbo state. We do have a Floyd Hill funding PLT meeting coming up, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's about all I can think of.
Yeah, I can share on that too. There are separate issue task forces being formed for the specific early improvement projects around the roundabouts and around the roundabouts that I'm participating in as well. So things are starting to move a little bit. So I can move on to the recreation planning topic, if that's acceptable, George.
Yep, sounds great. Oh yeah, because you're 2 in a row. Yeah, now we're talking about recreation.
Yeah. So this is another topic just with a brief update. And the board has talked about this at different times over the past few weeks that I've heard. The Clear Creek Recreation in the Outdoor Management Plan as you know, was not awarded a CPW grant through their non-motorized trails planning grant program this past spring, January, because of an upcoming regional recreation planning funding program from CPW. They decided not to fund our program because they knew another program was coming up. We are not, the Clear Creek County is not going to pursue participating in that program because it just isn't quite, we're not truly a regional planning program. NOCO is participating in that program. I don't think it's really clear whether Clear Creek County will benefit directly from that. Cash wise, Randy, I mean, I don't think we would get direct money from that, is what I meant. I didn't mean benefit from NOCO. Obviously, we're benefiting from NOCO. I meant we're not, the ROMP project would
Yeah,
not.
let me clarify on that. The way
Yeah.
we'll benefit from that will reduce our cost is that we don't have to go out and independently study all the exact same things that are going on.
Absolutely.
Integrate the two. So that's why when I looked up at the ceiling, that's just what I thought, because I'd heard that said a few times in months or things like that. And so I just want to be clear that the reason, so GOCO, and it was actually the folks at CPW who recommended to us that GOCO would be a good use of these funds at this time because they'll be funding planning that will help Clear Creek County's plan through NOCO. Otherwise, it would be going to so.
Absolutely. I meant that the Clear Creek ROMP wouldn't be, like, it wouldn't be funding any parts of the Clear Creek ROMP, or it wasn't clear whether
it will contribute to it.
It
It contributes to it, but it won't give us the cash through
yeah,
that.
well, and
in this iteration, but there may be some in the future that come to us directly.
Exactly. Right. And that's what I meant. It wasn't clear whether maybe the GOCO or the NOCO, the NOCO participation in CPW's regional rec planning may actually provide some funding that could help the Clear Creek ROMP. But if that is not clear, and obviously Clear Creek's participation in the program is going to help. Yes. Sorry, Randy. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we looked into that, and because they only have so many grant cycles through NOCO, that was part of it. I mean, through the CPW, that was part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a big talk about whether to also apply through CPW. And we thought, well, GOCO for this year would avoid having a double iteration, but we do have on the schedule to be able to bring, if we, as part of NOCO's plan, it was to try to bring funding and help facilitate bringing funding to the counties as well for individual county plans that hand it off as a channel. But that probably wouldn't happen this year because they asked us to come in with a regional partnership, and that's all our funding is administration and capacity building at this time. So that's why they pointed us that way, but we may go back to it. So sorry about the confusion.
No, it's no problem. But in any event, in June or July, GOCO, and gosh, the NOCO GOCO thing, that's hard on my brain. But GOCO is revamping their planning grant program, and they're doing a couple things. One is they're dividing their planning grant program into two different programs. One that's focused on more specific projects, like if you're trying to do planning for a specific trail system, versus planning for something like what we're doing, which is more overarching planning project like our recreation plan. So they're dividing that into two separate programs, which is great. And they're also, instead of having just one annual cycle, they're doing multiple cycles. I believe they're doing 4 cycles a year. And so that's also great news. And I think the way the woman who's managing these programs framed it to me was that it's just in response to applicants' needs. So those programs should be published in June or July. So we are anticipating applying for funds through GOCO to fund the Clear Creek ROMP as basically originally conceived, depending on what the parameters of the program actually are. So hopefully we will be able to get moving on this still in 2021. And the CPW grant cycle was a lot longer, so we weren't anticipating really getting going on the ROMP until June or July of this year anyway. So we're definitely going to be delayed, but hopefully we can still get started at least in the calendar year 2021. And if we, we still have to get a grant, but hopefully we can, and we'll see what their what kind of funding limits they have, what kind of matches required. We do still have some money budgeted in our capital budget for 2021 for grant match. And, hopefully we'll be able to get this puppy funded and get going.
And you've got a comment from Fred here suggesting that maybe a mineral and energy impact grant could be a fallback option. No, they swept that. They swept a lot out of that fund, but I haven't tracked whether it came back. Anyway. That all sounds great to me. And just to define that internal acronym that we're using, ROMP is the Recreation in the Outdoors Master Plan.
Management plan, technically, but yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I see we have a question in here, and I think I know the answer, but rather than me take a stab at it, I'll ask it of you, Amy, because I think we talked about this last week. Can you just describe the way that the Dumont put-in was redesigned based on feedback from the rafting community?
Yeah, we did work with, we met with staff and CDOT and some members of the rafting community, and what we ended up deciding to do was a pretty simple fix. We are going to remove from the design the two large island medians that were in place along the southern edge of the trailhead parking lot that contained sections of greenway, and that will basically make the improvements to the trailhead mimic the existing footprint more directly. And between that and making some adjustments to the striping and operationalizing of the parking area, be able to satisfy the rafting community and still make good on the commitment to create a multi-use trailhead that improves the trailhead and serves the community.
Thank you. I suspect that we have arrived at the end of this update.
That is all I have, yes.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on recreation or?
No, not right now. I think that's great. I'm glad we're getting the GOCO grant moving forward, and thanks, Amy. I just want to make sure nobody.
Sorry to frustrate you, Randy. Yeah.
Well, I just a brief comment from me just on these updates in general. I think this is very valuable. I think that, throwing 15 minutes on and only taking 10 is great. So that, I mean, you can always send Randy and I an email, but I think it's good for the public to see into this stuff as well.
Well, yeah. That was my take as well. Sorry, Randy.
No, I just agree. That's all. I kind of try to throw out whatever I've stuck my foot in lately in transportation and on this stuff, but you always have so much more going at the county level that it's very, very informative and helpful. Helps keep us on the same page.
Yeah. So thank you. And since we're done with that, the next thing on our agenda is a 10 a.m. Board of County Commissioners consent agenda, followed by a work session to discuss mission at every desk with you, Amy. So we will see you all in 5 minutes. We're on break until then. All right, it's 10 o'clock. We'll get started momentarily. And we're back.
We have a quorum, but we don't have anybody else.
Well, let's get some stuff done. Oh, hi, Beth.
Well,
So it is 10 o'clock. Next item on the agenda is the Board of County Commissioners consent agenda. I will go ahead and read it. Consideration of approval of the warrant register is item 1. Item 2, consideration of approval of memorandum of understanding amongst the Colorado Department of Transportation and Clear Creek County Roundabout Transit for CDOT's Connected Colorado project. Any comments or discussion on any of these items?
Nope.
I don't have any comment either.
so I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next on the agenda is a work session to discuss mission at every desk with Amy. Amy, what do you have for us?
Thank you. This is another topic to provide you with an update on and get some input. As you know, the staff has been working diligently on the Mission at Every Desk project for the last several months. Mission at Every Desk is comprised of 3 main areas. One is a mission-focused 5-year strategic plan. We've made good progress on this. We've completed the 5-year plan, identified a good list of 2021 strategic objectives, and wanted to provide you with an update on that. The strategic objectives have been developed with your input and this year, significant input from the leadership team as well, which is a change from the 2020 5-year strategic plan. We've identified owners among the leadership team for each of the strategic objectives. And I provided a list of the strategic objectives organized by the overarching strategic goals and a status update. The staff is working right now to create work plans for each one of those objectives. They're all in pretty different kind of condition, I guess is how to describe them. Some of them are pretty far along and are really well underway, like Carl's project around the funding for, let's see, let me just see the right way to talk about this one, around funding for road infrastructure and assets. We have been talking about that. You guys have been talking about that with him and his team multiple times. And some projects are really haven't gotten very far. But we are nevertheless planning on putting each one of these strategic objectives into a strategic objectives template to present to you that organizes them similarly and updates you on how they are, what their status is. So you can see them all together. It also will give you an opportunity to make sure that that you know what's going on for the ones that are in progress, and for those that are sort of starting off, give you an opportunity to say, oh yeah, that looks great, or give input to make sure that they are lining up with the objective that you had in mind. Because obviously a strategic objective sentence may not be enough to really be direction for staff. So that is the purpose of that work plan. But that's feeling like a pretty productive process. We're shooting to have all of those work plans complete by June 21st. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? One moment here. Yeah, okay, that's about it there. Any questions or comments on the objectives and owners and the strategic objectives and that general plan and timeline?
I don't. We've talked a lot about these individual objectives, who owns them. It looks really good to me. I wonder sometimes how you keep track of all this, and then I look at your great list, and that's how.
Yes, the list is handy. And you know, I think you know this too. We added a second monthly leadership team meeting to focus on this project specifically. And so that is part of that puzzle as well. So the leadership team is really definitely putting in the time and taking seriously this work, both from the perspective of wanting to be responsive to the direction that you all have provided, but also because we want to do this work, right? It's in our interest, and yeah, it's part of it helps us be able to be more effective and be more connected to the mission of the organization as well.
The one thing that I see, and I'm just thinking I must not have read fast enough. And so I'm just going through again to make sure I'm not missing it. I didn't see it, is the recreation plan should be on here.
It's the recreation plan is a 2022 item.
Okay.
And so that's actually when it will be completed. So that is why it's not on this list, but it is in the 5-year plan. And it is a project that is underway as well.
Okay. And I'm imagining that would be under goal 3.
Quality of life.
Yeah. I think it's quality of life and, health of the environment surrounding it that contributes to quality of life. And that, I guess the reason I expected to see there is I know you've been working on trying to get it rolling, and we'll see how it comes out. We may be working on it some this year, and certainly we're working on it without money, at least up here, at the current time. So
yeah. But it will not be completed in 2021. So I mean, I think that's why it's considered a 2022 goal, and why I think we left it there.
Objective. And the only thing I would say to that is that I think it's likely that a real recreation plan for the county is going to take, it may go beyond 2022.
It might be. It might end up being a 2023
So
goal.
it wouldn't bother me if you threw it on there anytime.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. So
yeah.
But that's the only comment I have. Thanks for the good work.
Great. Okay. And then we wanted to just update you two on the individual annual plan.
Before we move off of the goals, one thing that's not entirely clear in my head is where you're asking the board to engage on goals.
On the objectives. Yeah. I know I always say goals and objectives. I just need to, it's my own little discipline to try to keep those two straight in my head. That is, the next phase for your engagement is going to be to review the work plans. And I don't know exactly how that's going to look in terms of timing, other than the leadership team will be completing our first draft work plans on June 21st. And that's where it gets a little bit unclear too. It's a little bit organic, to be honest, because some of these you are already engaged on several of these really. And sometimes we're going to be looking to your engagement to say, is this what you want us to do? And some of these are, here's an update on that we're putting on paper on a project that's underway, and it's continuing. And so some you're already engaged on, some we're looking for specific input on, and really each objective is going to be a little bit different, but a milestone for sure is that we're trying to get all of these into a consistent format of a work plan. And then that will, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. It's a little bit of a work in progress, but I could imagine maybe we organize it a little bit by goal or by the work plans or by the type of input we're looking for from you. But I think the first milestone to understand is the June 21st work that the leadership team is trying to complete. And then I think we can expect that maybe the leadership team will be able to then provide you with sort of a plan from there in terms of what that might look like. That could be organized in a variety of ways.
Okay.
I hope that is a non-answer. That is good enough for now.
Yeah, I'm not expecting that we'll arrive at any conclusions right now, but there are some objectives, like I'm looking at an objective about redistricting that feels like a pretty small, I don't want to like call Matt's job easy
Right.
because it's not easy, but like, something that maybe doesn't need commissioner engagement. Whereas I also see obtain input on county tourism trends and determine how to optimize outcomes for economic benefit. That's a big messy issue, right?
Yeah.
And
right.
so maybe, the board could kind of select objectives that we're interested in.
Yeah.
And that we want to team up with the people who own them. And I'm not
Absolutely.
suggesting we go through that right now, but you guys all probably know that I would love to be on the one trying to figure out how to optimize tourism for economic benefit.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, George. And I think that would be great. I mean, there are several that could be well, some are more have better boundaries than others, and just like people. And and that is and that's just another bit of the breadth that we have to manage as we work through implementing these objectives and developing the work plans, because some of the work plans really are going to need a lot of input and feedback from you as the BOCC, and some are going to need less. So that's another variable in the objectives, is the amount of input that is going to be needed from the BOCC, the amount of interest from the BOCC, and then the amount of progress that's already made on these objectives is another variable. So, really, we just need to figure out a way to organize that and add that information into the to this matrix and so at least in my brain, I think developing these work plans, getting all of the objectives sort of into a similar format, and just trying to figure out how to make sure that is going to happen. Because I mean, I think that's the one thing that, well, not the one thing, but a thing that is clear is that all of these objectives, they all require the exact appropriate level of BOCC input, and that's figuring out what that level is and making sure that happens is the task at hand. And that's why we're having this conversation now. And I think that's what the next task is over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's all. I will gladly be done talking about those objectives and goals. I think you have
Yeah.
more to go through. So thank you for taking that right turn with me.
Anything else to add? Anybody else here? Peter? Anybody? Okay. The next topic, the second element of the Mission at Every Desk project, is the individual annual plan. That tool is an employee development tool designed to replace the performance appraisals that have been in place, aimed to kind of shift our focus from more like a tool that identifies areas for improvement to areas of success, a tool to help staff and their team members connect and do goal identification, have some structured conversations throughout the year. So that tool is developed, it has been launched, it's underway. And we're working on getting those. Many teams have used them and have turned them into HR collects and tracks them, and how exactly those will be sort of monitored and quantified is still sort of remains to be seen. We're collecting feedback along the way, and positive feedback, I think we're getting positive feedback on them. We have not, I would say we have not had like the, we don't have 100% usage of the tool as of yet. It's not like every single employee has had a chance to sit down with their supervisor and have these conversations. So there's still work to be done on how to implement something like this and make it really something that is really fully utilized by everyone. That's what I would say at this point.
I think
But
that matches my expectations.
yeah. Okay. And then finally, I just want to talk about the third element of the Mission at Every Desk project, which is a tool for teams. So I'm sure you recall this as well. This is the idea of coming up with a system for teams to use to help them operate as a team, to manage and monitor their success, to empower teams, and be able to report their success, and I think perhaps give the BOCC and leadership a view of how of their success and how of their progress. What we decided to do as our initial approach was utilize was run a pilot basically with 4DX, which is Stephen Covey's tool for teams. 4DX is the 4 disciplines of execution. It's a pretty simple program, or pretty simple idea. It's basically about setting a goal, coming up with a couple of critical measures for that goal, adding in some accountability for that goal, and systems of tracking that goal, using like structured tools like meetings. So we went through that system, watched some videos, went over some resources that Stephen Covey had available, did that with the planning and building services team, tried to identify what some wildly important goals would be with the work that the planning and building services team was undertaking. Our conclusion was that, at least for the work that our team was working on at the time, that the we were a little cart before the horse. The work that our team really was engaging on was really project focused. Our work, we had to, the work that our team was working on was very much about a project to improve and hone the customer service processes that are in place for the planning and building services team, and how we move permits through. And it was just a little difficult to make that project fit with the 4DX system. And so our conclusion was that that would fit maybe once we got our project complete. So what we propose to do as next steps would be to take a look at this 4DX system and maybe have a conversation with one of the other departments about it and figure out whether their processes would be a good fit for it. And also to keep using the language of the 4DX system. One of the things that you've probably heard me say this before, but one of the things that was really most interesting about the 4DX system to me was the idea of how we measure things and what sort of measurements we try to track, and the difference between this concept of lead measures versus lag measures. Lead measures being the things you can control, and lag measures being the things that that are relevant but happen a little bit later in the process. And Covey uses the analogy of weight loss, right? Like diet and exercise are lead measures. Those are the things you can control, you have an influence over, and the number on your scale is a lag measure, right? So once you go and stand on the scale, your weight is there, right? You can't control the number on the scale unless you have an old scale where you have a little wheel you can turn, but that is obviously not, that doesn't really count. But identifying those lead measures is really important, right? What are those lead measures you can control? That was another thing we struggled to identify on the planning and building services team, is what would those things be? Like the length of a phone call, you know, what we struggled with that a little bit. But continuing to use that language and think of those things seemed like a healthy, good thing to do. Yeah, and I think it might be good to also spend some time looking at other tools. But I think the thing that I personally came away with is that really thinking as an organization about what we want out of providing this tool to our teams. Is it that we're looking to monitor the performance of our teams in a way similar to what performance appraisals we're doing for individual employees? Or are we looking to provide a tool for teams to improve their day-to-day experience of their jobs? And I don't know that we really have the answer for that. You know, what is the motivation for the directive to provide, to seek this tool? And it's been something we've been talking about for as long as I've been here. You know, the idea of a dashboard, of some way to see how teams are doing. And I think to really get into to be able to design a tool or to identify a tool that's going to work for teams, it really being as clear as possible for the purpose that we're looking for, that you as the BOCC are looking for, as Brian comes in, you know, what is his purpose? I see he's here on the call. Hi, Brian.
Remy.
What is his purpose for this? And you know, I talked about this a little bit on our leadership team call last week, but I mean, I think it is challenging to find project or process management tools that really work in organizations. I think I've been in a few different organizations and tried a few different systems. Every organization I've been in wants a system. And I've never seen one successfully implemented. And it's not like I've been a million places or done a million different things, but it's hard. It's hard to find one that really works. And, you know, I don't, I'm no expert in organizational design or anything, but I suspect that part of the reason may be is because it isn't truly coming from everyone's perspective. It is, and so it isn't always a system that truly is based on all of the different needs of all the different stakeholders in a system like this. I don't know if that's true, but that's, you know, that would be one potential diagnosis I would make. But I think that that's fixable. You know, I think you can come up with adding more perspectives to the mix of figuring out what a tool like this can do and what more stakeholders are looking for. And, you know, it is also realistic to think about those perspectives with a realistic view of the different perspectives, right? Different perspectives, some have specific authority associated with them, some have specific responsibilities associated with them, some have specific subject matter expertise associated with them. And so, and they all have to fit together to figure out what is really going to work and what is the purpose. So I think the tools for teams piece of Mission at Every Desk is one of the more critical elements of the entire project, and is probably going to be the hardest element to be successful at. So, you know, I will probably be, I will be looking to you for more input, and Sean has some input right now. Yay, I'm glad you're here, Sean.
Yeah, as it turns out, I'm waiting at the airport, so I have 3 hours and I can join the rest of the meeting. But at the risk of oversimplifying this, my perspective is that whatever platform you pick, it's all about improving the organization's performance and doing a better job for our customers, which is the public. And I've seen a few of them. I've seen it mostly fail also, although I strongly believe it was not the fault of any of the tools. I think it was basically a lack of mandate or a lack of organizational will to change and to make it happen. And I know that lots of organizations have had great success with the different Covey approaches, along with, and honestly, I think anything will work if you commit to it and are patient, and you basically have a mandate from the top to the bottom to do this. So that's my perspective. And I don't know, Brian, I would be curious. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we're so excited that you're coming on board, is your experience with organizational performance. So if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it too.
Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of thoughts on this topic, actually having led these kinds of processes in other organizations. So I think it's obviously a conversation we'll have to have as a leadership team, to come together and just to have a conversation about that and what these kind of models look like. But yeah, a lot of them fail because change is hard, right? And we're talking about changing an organization, and that's oftentimes why things fail, is because change is hard, and a lot of folks resist it. And so it's having that understanding and being able to use that kind of knowledge to inform whatever model it is that we ultimately use in the end to increase performance and ultimately service to all of our customers. So yeah, I'll have lots of thoughts to be talking with all of you about once I'm there and started. So
thank you for that, Brian, and it's good to see you. And I have a question for Amy. When you were running through this with your planning team, did you have someone from 40X going through that with you?
No, we did not.
Okay, that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
It's probably not budgeted, but could be helpful.
I think that's important because, as Sean brought up, and whether we call it mandates or whether we call it the encouragement of adoption, however we do it, we need, it's got to be there has to be an adoption that is system wide, for it to be done. And so to work, to consult with 40X is a good way to help bring that message, I think, accurately to the team. Just a thought.
And I do think a natural byproduct would be higher enthusiasm and job satisfaction. I do think that there's a possibility that the beginning it might not look like that quite, but my expectation is that people would have a better understanding about what was expected of them and how they fit into the overall mission of the organization, and also how they were doing and how their team was doing. So I think it will be a difficult process, but I believe that if we're committed to it, we will end up having a workplace that people enjoy more and feel better about.
Yep, my experience is that a mandate alone is tough to use effectively, and a mandate with well conceived messaging and buy-in is how you build success. And I think you can't have, I will go ahead and say you can't have one without the other. Mandate alone is part of why these things do not work. And it is a difficult position to put supervisors in, and it is you can't do it by itself. And I'm not suggesting that's what you all are suggesting, and you can't do it without a mandate either. You do need to have commitment and to make something like this work. So I don't think you can just make it be totally voluntary, but I think the more genuine buy-in can be, the better.
Thank you, Andy. And I just real quick, Randy, apologize. Quick time check. It's 10:32. So we're done with the official time for this. So final comments.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I think Amy articulated at least partially what I was getting at, which was certainly it takes, a commitment. A lot of stuff does start at the top and come down. And so the knowledge that that's what people want is important. At the same time, adoption means an understanding and some level of buy-in. And these are great. They're, as Sean stated a little bit ago, you can pick your system. There are a lot of good systems out there, but you have to have a commitment to it. But then what you also have to do is an understanding of that system within the team, so that everybody's not just nodding their head in a meeting, then going home and say, what the hell was that, when they get home, cracking a beer and forgetting about it. We got to say, hey, we're about this. And to become enthusiastic about anything, you have to understand it. So that's why bringing in the experts on whatever the system is and making sure that it's out there and that people can understand, hey, this really can work, is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. And the experts go home eventually, and no matter what, it has to still sit on everybody's desk, and they actually have to do it after the experts go home. And so that's where the rubber meets the road on these systems. It has to so someone has to mandate it, someone has to teach it, people have to buy into it, and then it has to actually enhance people's daily work. They have to find it useful. And then it also has to do what it actually meant to do, which is increase performance. That's a tall order.
Thank you, Amy. Brian, I want to welcome you to add any final words here that you'd like.
Well, first and foremost, it pleases me greatly to know that this is a topic of conversation for the organization. That's not always the case in organizations. So, I think one of the things that employees are going to quickly learn about me is I'm going to be talking a lot about, purpose Why are we here? Because it really starts there. What are we trying to accomplish? Why do we come to work every day? And so what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish when you think about all the varied services that the county provides? And they all meld together and they provide what? And that's our purpose. And then it's about engaging employees and ensuring we have engaged employees and what is the organization? I'm going to assume that the hiring practices in the county are working, right? So you got people coming into the city or into the county already engaged and wanting to do great work. So then the question the org has to ask itself then is, what are we doing to create disengaged employees, right? What specifically is happening in the organization where people may become disengaged over time? And so again, this is a great topic. Love to know that that's one of the priorities for the county as I walk through the door on day one.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. So next on our agenda is a executive session. So Peter, this is your prompt. And I'm waiting for him to come on camera so I can, okay.
Sorry,
No
I didn't
worries.
take myself off mute and I had it written down, so.
Okay, I move the board into executive session for the following purposes.
And that's what I had written down and then lost, so hold on.
Oh.
And I did send you, just so you know, I did send you a Zoom link. So it is for, sorry. The purposes of pursuant to CRS 24640224E for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purposes of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with regard to matters related to both the coroner's office facility as well as Henderson Mine.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you over there.
Okay, the board will adjourn into executive session. No written minutes will be kept. No decisions will be made. We will be back promptly at 11 o'clock for the COVID update. Okay, we are back. We have concluded our executive session. No written minutes were kept, no decisions were made. I actually believe Sean will be joining us in just a moment, so maybe we can hold off for him. Okay, the whole team is here. So this is our weekly COVID update. Dr. Ryan, what do you have for us?
Good morning. So let's start with the numbers. Nationally, we have crossed 33 million plus confirmed cases across the US. Even that is a far underestimate, as most states have stopped the majority of testing. The case rate, the average daily number of new cases has declined over the last 4 weeks. Number of new cases is at 25,318, still significantly high, and due in part to the lack of testing across the country. Hospitalizations continue to be high around the country. Fatalities, we've now lost 590,000 Americans at a rate of 563 per day as a 7-day average over the last week. Test positivity rate is at 3% now. Again, an artifact of lack of testing across most of the country. Major contributing factors to the spread, the variant B117, the unvaccinated, lowering mandates and social gatherings, travel, etc. Vaccination rate across the country, only 38% of Americans are fully vaccinated, and 48.2% are vaccinated with at least one dose. Here in Colorado, current number of daily new cases continues a slow decline, now in excess of over 800 per day as a 7-day average. Our 2-week cumulative incident rate is at 209 per 100,000. Hospitalizations saw a slight decrease across the state over the last week. Currently, 38% of ICU ventilators are in use, and 81% of all ICU beds are currently occupied. There are 556 individuals.
The last maybe 10 seconds or so, you broke up a little bit.
So, did you hear the case rate for Colorado?
Yes.
Let's start there. Okay, 2-minute incident rate is at 209 per 100,000. Slight decrease across the state in hospitalizations, although 38% of ICU ventilators are in use and 81% of ICU beds are currently in use. There are 556 people confirmed COVID hospitalized as we speak. Test positivity rate is at 3.1%. Contributing factors of the spread, the variant B117 and the unvaccinated, lack of mask wearing, social gatherings, travel, etc. Vaccination rate here in Colorado, people immunized with one dose, we are up to 52.7%, and folks fully immunized are at 43.6%. Clear Creek County specifically, case counts over the last 7 days, we've had 10 cases in the last 7 days and 20 cases in the last 2 weeks, at 457 total to date. Hospitalizations hold steady at 22 with 3 fatalities. Our 2-week cumulative incident rate is at 133 per 100,000. 2-week test positivity rate is at 5.0%. Major contributing factors to the spread in our county are the unvaccinated. Testing updates. We are continuing testing in the community in Idaho Springs. The location is shifting just a little bit, moving basically to the north side of the highway now, over by the bus barn and in the parking lot between the bus barn and the old ball field. Start next Tuesday. Continuing to test in the jail. Testing will continue. The contract with the state is through June, so we'll see what the state decides they want to do forward after that point. Vaccine update. We are at 54.1% of the eligible population has received at least one dose of the vaccine. Of the vaccines fully immunized, we are at 47.2%. As far as vaccines are concerned, we still have Pfizer, the Moderna, and J&J. We have a clinic tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. We are extending all Wednesday clinics that we've been doing for the last 6 weeks. We're now extending them into the evening hours to accommodate folks who work for a living. Can't be to 5 general hours. So we're going to be doing that all the way through June at a minimum, 10 to 7 at the Resource Center in Idaho Springs. Simultaneously tomorrow, we will be doing a clinic in Empire and just in downtown Empire at Theobald Field, and we'll be doing that at the same time. In addition, we are in the process of creating an incentive program, if you will, to incentivize folks to get vaccinated. We have secured 2 ski season passes, one to Loveland and one to Echo Mountain. They're now actively reaching out to other businesses to get other incentives, and we will have a drawing in the near future for folks who have been vaccinated and give those prizes out. So more details to come. We're still working on the logistics of it and need to put a legal disclaimer in there so Peter will be involved in all sorts of fun stuff. So just trying to create an incentive for folks to get vaccinated moving forward. Any questions thus far?
Just a comment. I saw that, I think it was the state of Ohio I think it's a lottery for $400,000 for people who've been vaccinated. I wonder if we might want to put some cash into that incentive too.
That's your call. I don't have the cash to put in there, but that would be a county incentive. We've been going to the businesses specifically. I mean, the Loveland Ski Pass is a $500 value in and of itself. So certainly worthy of discussion. That's all I got for numbers. There's any other comments, questions? The only other update on vaccine, as you probably heard, Moderna came out with their data, are going to be submitting for approval for 12 to 15-year-olds. So hopefully by the fall, when school rolls around, we will have 2 vaccines to be able to disseminate to the younger group up to 12. It's going to be a while before we get to the under 12s, probably sometime late fall.
Do you anticipate when younger populations start to become eligible, going back to a mass vaccination model, or what are you thinking in terms of this? Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think going to the school as we did at the middle school, high school last week, it was a model that it worked really well. We were able to vaccinate 64 students in a matter of an hour and a half. I think rather than have parents drive to Dumont, we may as well meet them where they're going to go 5 days a week anyway. So administering that at the schools, and/or they have an opportunity to go potentially to their doctor's office where they may be getting an annual physical and that sort of thing. So there's absolutely no shortage of places to get vaccinated at this point in time.
And I just received a text, of course. I think rec center membership is also one of the incentives that's being mentioned, thanks to the rec center.
Yeah,
sure
we're talking to the manager there. Many other businesses around the county. I think now that we have these 2 anchor, if you will, prizes with the 2 ski passes, and hoping that other businesses step up and offer up what they can to create that incentive. So.
Great. just I have things on my mind, but I want to offer lots of space to my colleagues here.
My suggestion is that you move forward with those thoughts.
Okay. So, Tim, in yesterday's meeting of the Idaho Springs Recovery Group, I did my best to channel what I thought would be your message coming now that we don't have a mask rule. And I think I just want to repeat it here and see if you agree with it. I think that what you would say is that just looking at the split vote and the fact that you were not recommending we drop the mask mandate is evidence that the reduced mask rules around the state are not evidence that we are in a safer environment. In fact, I think that the world in Clear Creek County got more dangerous last Thursday. And I think that businesses should be encouraged to continue to mask up their staff, to continue to encourage people to wear masks in their businesses. I think that one of the things that's been on my mind is how the businesses find a good partner in us, the businesses that do choose to continue to require masks. And then, of course, the emphasis on vaccines and getting staffs vaccinated, as well as the general public, because the world, this isn't evidence that the world is safer. This is evidence that the world is more dangerous. Do you agree with that? Do you have anything to add to that?
I couldn't have said it better myself, George. I totally agree with that sentiment. As I saw anecdotally across the county this last weekend, as I was out with my family, what I'm seeing in the businesses that I went to and just passed by is reflective of the guidance been giving. Your employees, particularly the ones who are unvaccinated, are literally your Achilles heel. It is those individuals that potentially will be isolated and or quarantined and or require quarantine from others when in fact they do become COVID positive. So it's incumbent upon them to make that decision. My guidance and suggestion has been for many weeks that it's really important that your employees continue to mask up, particularly the ones who are unvaccinated. And you know, that's a business to business decision now that we don't have a mandate locally or more broadly. So it's incumbent upon them to make sure that that happens. So, and from what I saw this weekend, most businesses, particularly restaurants, seem to be adhering to that. I saw almost all wait staff with masks on, even ones that I know are vaccinated. The staff is still masked up. So I think I heard an economic report yesterday that was looking at who's going out, who's going to restaurants, and looking at their vaccination status. And strangely, well, it's not strange to me, but the folks who are continuing to mask up, ironically, are those who are vaccinated, because they are anticipating, and I think to some degree, rightly so, that the unmasked are, in fact, the majority of those folks are, according to this analysis, were in fact unvaccinated. And the vaccinated are not quite comfortable yet going out in the same level into restaurants, et cetera, without a mask on. So that's just one report, but I think it probably bears true, not only in our states, but more broadly across the country, which is where the analysis was looking at.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to, my own motivations for continuing to wear a mask are also just social, right? Like I think that wearing masks is the advice, and the more of us who do it, the more people feel like that's something that we should be doing. Maybe that's, you know, a way to try to keep mask use rates from falling through the floor.
Yeah, and I think our current reality is reflective of the reality on the ground in terms of mask wearing, right? In a restaurant, as an example, by removing mask mandates across the country, across the state, locally, really protecting your workers as a business owner is your number one priority. And all the arguments we heard last week about how you know, the 17-year-old server can't really get the guy from Texas who weighs 250 pounds and 3 times their size to wear a mask. So it's really shifted that paradigm and really put the responsibility on protecting yourself and protecting your workers, rather than trying to enforce, as you all pointed out, an unenforceable mandate or unenforceable reality. So I think we're going to see that continue through the fall. You know, businesses know and understand, I think, for the most part, the risk that unvaccinated, unmasked people pose to their own economics of their business, particularly when it comes to their own staff. So
I would say some do, some don't. I had 2 real interesting experiences yesterday evening. I think the more people, I think as we knew before, the more people wore them, the more people wore them. You know, that stubborn bunch. I don't think we're affected by the mask orders as much at the end as we finally got to near 100% compliance. I think it was the fact that everybody in the place had one on. I don't really know how many restaurants will, and other types of businesses, not just restaurants, denigrating restaurants, but some people do and some don't. I mentioned the experience that my niece had during our meeting last week when she went to a local hotel and with a mask on, and the person saw that she was from Texas and said, "Oh, you can take it off now." And she said, "No, I prefer to wear it." And they said, No, you can take it off now." And then I went into a restaurant last night with a friend. I won't say which town even, but it was in Clear Creek County. And because I haven't been in restaurants much since Thursday, and no one in the place had one on at all. And there was one person who sat there and looked at us and started laughing as we walked by with our masks on. And so anyway, when we walked back through, when we were done, the person I was with said, "I'm not going to put it back on and endure that," and walked on through and didn't wear their mask. And I went ahead and wore my mask to get through the restaurant and leave. And we can debate all day long about whether it matters anyway, because you took it off when you sat at the table or anything else. But I think it's a clear indication of the kind of human behavior. That was one of the incidents. The other one was last night's incident. The other one was when I watched the news last night and watched them interviewing people in restaurants saying that now they're having a harder time getting people to wear masks and getting in more arguments because it's no longer an official order and because it's their responsibility to tell them to put them on. So they were just starting to give up. And so anyway, that's my observation on just human behavior and what I see going on. And I agree with George that last Thursday in Clear Creek County, it got a little bit more dangerous.
Well, so we're going to continue to do our part to get as many vaccines out as we can, get as many folks vaccinated as we can, and provide as many opportunities for that across the county. You know, if again, to the broader people listening to this meeting, if you do know friends, neighbors, relatives who haven't been vaccinated, who need to be some facts, we have plenty of those available via all of our sources on the website and Facebook, et cetera. We're going to continue to do that and continue to offer vaccines as long as there is demand. And so demand has not yet dropped off. It has obviously gone down, but is not at zero. So we're going to continue our efforts until we get to that point. And, you know, we now have a list, now that we have actual accurate data from the state. We're circling back with roughly 300 folks who haven't gotten their second dose, who should have, circling back with them and really trying to get them in and get our secondary number, if you will, up to that higher number of fully vaccinated folks, so that we can, you know, get past 55% and hopefully get towards 70 if we can.
And I'd like to just say that, so I'm not all doom and gloom in this meeting, because it's not doom and gloom, is that the other good thing I saw in the news last night was the level to which the national average was rising in terms of vaccinated percentages, and that's good. And I don't know if it's going to pan out or not, but I did get that bulk mailing off in Empire into the PO boxes yesterday about tomorrow's vaccine clinic here, and hopefully that'll help a little bit. So.
And George, to answer your original question, circle back to that. So as you know, I've been talking to businesses since the last July. We have both Alyssa and Rebecca reaching out to them as well. I'm on several calls a week talking to businesses, and we will continue to provide that. If businesses need guidance because of the lack of a mandate, and what does that mean for them? How do they function without that protection there? We're more than happy to work with them. Continue to provide them guidance as they move forward, particularly around vaccines, continuing to reach out to businesses, trying to get them their unvaccinated employees in, and we'll continue to do that work through the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you. And I have like an idea related to public health orders that would support businesses that want to continue to require masks. We could require folks to comply with businesses who set those rules in a public health order, which I think might give law enforcement more options when they're dealing with folks. I think right now, under the current status, if someone's refusing to wear a mask, then they need to refuse to leave and commit trespassing, and then maybe become obnoxious enough that it's disturbing the peace or something. Whereas if we had a public health order that said that you had to comply with any private property mask orders or mask rules, we might just give law enforcement another tool.
Don't you already have to comply with whatever rules exist at a private establishment, whether it's no shirt, no shoes, no service, anything like that?
Yeah, you do. There's, I think, an additional charge that could be assessed if we had a public health order that said that they had to do that.
Have we had anyone from the business community ask us to do that?
I have had some communication from a business owner who wanted to continue to require masks and who wanted to know how the county was going to have their backs, how the county was going to support them in that.
Yeah, I think the question would be one of legality, George, which I don't know the answer to. I can't give unsolicited. I don't play a lawyer on TV or a doctor or any of those things. But and it would be whether you can have a public health order that says you have to follow the rule of the restaurant, whether that would constitute an actual public health. Because if you don't, if you have implied by your own action that you don't need a mask order in your county, can the same authority then say this person has violated a public health order and therefore faces a $5,000 fine because they didn't follow the rules that the restaurant told them to do? There's a logical disconnect there for me. And I don't know what Peter thinks about that or anybody else. It looks like Peter doesn't know either.
Yeah, I would defer to Peter. I mean, to Sean's point, no shirt, no shoes, no service, and they can prohibit you from entering or ask you to leave. So I don't know how this, from a legal perspective, would, if it's necessary, to Sean's point, or if it is an additive sort of thing that provides them a little bit more oomph to that rule, that general rule, whatever it's called, around, these are our rules for our establishment. If you don't meet those rules, you're not welcome. So I don't know, that I would defer to Peter or someone else with legal.
Yeah, I could support it. It's just if it even has any legal weight at all, when you haven't, you yourself have said the health risk does not require it. then you require somebody to, I mean, you could say, yeah, we can send the cops over because they're being disorderly and they won't obey the, they won't acknowledge the authority of the establishment over their own building. But can you say that, can you say that constitutes a public health risk? And it seems like it would be very difficult to
So
say
Randy,
those things.
I think you and I were discussing this briefly over the weekend, and essentially what it comes down to is it would not be a violation of a public health order. If a business said, we want you to wear a mask, please put your mask on, and somebody said no, it wouldn't be a violation of a public health order. What it would be is potentially disorderly conduct, in the same way that refusing to put a shirt on, refusing to put shoes on would potentially rise to that level as well if it became the result of an argument. So the fact is, a business has every right to refuse service to somebody for reasons that they set forward that are legal and not discriminatory, such as health and safety, such as no shirt, no shoes, no service, no smoking, something of that nature. All of that is justifiable for a business to do. If somebody gets into an argument with a business owner, which is really what happens in the likely outcome, it ends up rising to the level of disorderly conduct. And I see that the sheriff is on, and this would then fall into his bailiwick as to how they would enforce it. But the sheriff would not be enforcing a public health order violation.
And I think George's question was, can we pass a public health order that makes it a public health violation to not obey the business when they tell you to put a mask on? And
it would be a conflict with the order that very clearly says that you do not have a requirement to be wearing masks.
Right.
If the board is inclined to do that, we would carve out essentially an exception. It would be putting back in a public indoor place that requirement for masks in those type of situations.
Well, obviously, you guys all know me well. You know that I like to throw out poorly formulated concepts. In general, what I'm thinking is, what can we do as a county, whether it's through our regulatory authority, through our staff abilities, what can we do to be there for restaurants that want to require, not restaurants, businesses that want to require masks in their place of business?
Be more public than this meeting in our admonition that the risk has not passed. I mean, officially as a county, that the risk has not passed, and that we are asking both residents and visitors to comply with any business. I mean, to be as out there as possible. I don't know what else we can do other than having a deputy by every restaurant or every mask ordered restaurant ready to help them, tell them to put their shirt and their shoes and their mask back on, And
just so you're aware, in both the information that was put out by our public information officer, as well as information that was on Facebook, on the website, we very clearly point out that individuals are still expected to follow CDPHE and state guidelines and any requests of businesses or other workplaces. So we are still saying in the public word that they should be complying, because a workplace can absolutely institute a mask mandate equally. So so we are encouraging that publicly.
Okay. Thank you all for indulging that right turn. I received a text from Alyssa. If time allows, she would love to give an update. The job fair happened this morning. I think it's COVID related. It's recovery related. Maybe we can indulge Alyssa for a minute.
Very quick, I just wanted to tell you and celebrate success. And I know a bunch of our businesses listen, and so want to thank them publicly and let everybody know that if you did not attend today's, we will hopefully be doing it again soon because it was successful. So we had 29 businesses register and 137 job seekers register. That number may be a little bit different once I get the final report. So 137 job seekers registered, which is amazing. Our goal was set for 100. And of those 135 that registered, I believe that we had about 60 attend. So that is pretty much in line with what they are seeing across the board for all virtual job fairs. Of that, I'm able to see all the chat messages, resumes submitted, jobs posted. Not that it was a competition or anything, but Clear Creek County participated and got 9 applications submitted for jobs, which is fantastic. And I know a lot of other restaurants and businesses got significant applications submitted as well. So thank you everybody for helping us promote this. It was definitely a success.
Thank you for that, Alyssa. That's good news. Do you think that was there much mention of the $1,600 incentive for folks who are on unemployment to take a job and keep it for a couple months?
Are you talking about in the marketing or the conversations?
Just, yeah, in the conversation in the room, do you think that that might have contributed to our success? Because the timing just randomly ended up that announcement was made right as our ads were going out. And we were able to put
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. The way it works is there's like private rooms that everyone goes into. So I wasn't in any of the conversations. I was able to sign up as a job seeker and just message all the businesses and thank them for attending and get some anecdotal feedback from them. But we do plan on having a debrief conversation next Tuesday at 9 a.m. for anybody that's interested in attending, where we're going to get feedback like that, hear what kind of conversations they were having, what feedback they were getting. But right now, I don't know. We did promote it a good bit, so hopefully that helped with our registration numbers.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on this? I know that we're moving into our next session here. Okay. Oh, and now I see you unmuted. Go ahead.
No, I just unmuted to say I had nothing to say.
Okay, excellent. So then the next thing on our agenda and the last thing on our agenda is a work session to consider extending the COVID emergency declaration. Peter, I see you're listed on the agenda. I think Suzanne will be participating as well. What do you have for us?
That's correct. So Suzanne and I had actually talked about this over the past several weeks. And originally we were thinking that we were going to suggest to the board that we let the emergency declaration drop. However, in doing some additional research, and I see Suzanne coming over as well, there are certain aspects to the emergency declaration that would still allow us and actually make it significantly easier to utilize our CARES funds and any future funds as well, in terms of the need to occasionally not follow the necessary policies that we have in place that would be that exist when we are not in an emergency. In particular, one of the ideas that we've been hoping to do was bring on somebody who will assist in the use of our COVID CARES dollars and the proper way to seek reimbursements from FEMA and such. And in order to justify using CARES dollars to support that position, we would need the emergency declaration to still be in place. So Suzanne is here. I'll let her talk to it because frankly, she is tuned into this.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. As Peter mentioned, before I gathered some more data yesterday and last week, I was thinking that I would advise that we don't need to extend the declaration any longer. I think that now that we should, as Peter and I discussed, that we should. It doesn't hurt us or harm us in any way. It will allow for us, if we in fact bring on a firm or a person, as Peter mentioned, to help us make sure we get, especially our FEMA public assistance application and reimbursement in. As you know, as I've stated a number of times, that it's not a simple reimbursement process. It is a longer process with worksheets and lots of steps. This firm that I talked to yesterday, this is what they're doing for Denver, for other organizations in Colorado, in New York, and other national across the nation. What they let me know is that I wasn't aware of specifically is that in order to get reimbursement for their costs they're a contracting firm, we would need that FEMA, that local disaster declaration. FEMA will reimburse up to 5% of our reimbursement that we receive, that we put in for. So we're now, I think we're at 250-ish K for FEMA public assistance reimbursement. FEMA will pay up to 5% of that for consulting services to help us manage exactly what we're talking about. So based on that, and the fact that having an extension of our disaster declaration takes nothing away from us, that's why we're recommending extending that disaster declaration.
So if there, after the board has some consideration, what we're really looking for today is direction on whether to then bring back next week a resolution for consideration and adoption, extending the emergency declaration again for whatever time frame. We haven't figured out exactly the amount of the time frame that would be needed to at least satisfy that. And the reason we would bring it back next week is because there's a chance we may not have a quorum on the 8th. And so just in an abundance of caution, we would bring it then, even though it does not expire till June 9th.
I think you just touched on the question I was going to ask, which is, and I don't think that there's no downside. I mean, part of the downside is we are watering down the concept of what an emergency is by calling what's happening, you know, whatever, 16 months after the pandemic started, an emergency. I think it sounds like we're kind of agreeing unofficially that it's something different, and it is a convenience for us to have access to funds and other, there's other financial and operational advantages to saying that it's still an emergency, even though on the face of it, to most normal people, it doesn't really look like the emergency that it was a year ago. So my question is, how long are we going to be in this quote unquote emergency state going forward in order to be able to have access to dollars we wouldn't otherwise have access to, someone else's dollars?
And Suzanne, I don't know if you want to jump in. I was just going to say that typically what we've been doing is we've been doing an extension every 90 days and reevaluating. Depending on how the summer goes, I think that's a large effect as well. And there is nothing to stop us from coming back and reevaluating and also demonstrating even at that time why it has benefited us to keep it in place. But Suzanne, go right ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As far as from the FEMA public assistance perspective, that will go through the end of September. And it also kind of depends on when the national declaration is lifted. So if we do another 3 months, that I don't anticipate that we'd need to do it after that. But again, we can reassess. I hear what you say, Sean. Yeah, I guess I was looking at it from the emergency management perspective of not a downside. It doesn't hinder us or limit us. I understand what you're saying though about the public perspective and what it means. So if we continue to emphasize that our local disaster declaration helps us to access those funds that are going to help Clear Creek, and helps us to adjust any procedures that we might need to get those funds and other things more quickly, then if we look at it that way, that might help. But you're right, and I was looking at it from an emergency manager perspective. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks. And the last thing I'll say is, I mean, I think one of the purposes of declaring emergency is to allow for very important urgent decisions to be made with a lower standard, a lower level of process and public involvement and due diligence. And I personally feel like we're way beyond taking advantage of that. And so I'm okay with extending the declaration, knowing that in my mind, we're going to go through the same processes we will to make important public decisions using the full amount of due diligence and public involvement, and not taking advantage of this emergency status to increase the powers of this board or our county government.
You know, with all due respect, I'd like to say that no one's done that up till now.
I agree.
I would like to say, and excuse me, I'm talking, and I would like to say that I would also like to say that pretty much everything we've done with every bit as much due process as we can and in public. Nobody's hiding. So I just want to be clear about that statement and the one that characterizes what this is that we're really saying. What we're saying is we're extending the emergency declaration. And I think there's a period at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, not everyone is such a good guy as you, Randy, that can be trusted with power that they don't need.
Yeah, I hesitate to touch that one. I mean, I know I did not hear you, Sean, say that you think that we've used the emergency declaration to short circuit processes. So, and I think you're correct in not saying that. I'm just remembering that we spent a good month and a half debating a mask order, for example. I do have a couple of questions. One of them is, I don't think that public health orders can be made without an emergency declaration in place. Is that the case?
They can be made without an emergency declaration in place.
They can be made.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. So I'm in support of continuing it. And I share Sean's commitment, and I share Randy's commitment, and I share everybody on this county team's commitment to being transparent and thoughtful about the decisions we make, and inclusive. I will note that we have a public health order on the books through August 15th. I will note that we have a significant portion of the population that's not yet eligible for vaccines, and that we'll be running vaccine clinics. In my mind, I mean, I think we just heard we'll be running vaccine clinics at least into the school session. So I would not be surprised if we find that we need to extend it again after this 90 days. But that's just me speculating. My support for this emergency declaration lasts as long as this emergency does, and I still think we're still in a pandemic of a novel virus where Americans are dying, and so I think that fits my definition of an emergency. I realize that doesn't mean you have to go run somewhere because the house is on fire, but we're still trying to get people to get vaccinated. We're still trying to monitor our hospitalization capacities. We're still in an emergency in my mind. So that's kind of my take on it, and I would support an extension.
Yeah, and my comment is really about I mean, it was clear to me that Sean didn't say what had happened up until now, but there's an implication that we're overstepping our bounds. And what I heard in this conversation is that primarily, well, it's just an implication. If it undermines the public confidence in what it is we're doing and saying, I don't want to do that. And, recognizing that, I think is legitimate, but I hate to reinforce that perception, because I think we've tried to not do the kinds of things that are implied there. But in any case, the main reason is so that the funds are still available to us. And clearly, I think we just heard that we can still declare, if things go worse, and I don't expect they will, but if things go worse, we can redeclare a public health order of sorts, whether it's masks or something else. Again, looking at the news last night and the percentages, we're probably on the way out, but things can change.
Yeah, my only comment about using human life as a yardstick, at no point during this pandemic did COVID deaths exceed cancer and heart disease and some of the other things that are killing people quietly day after day after day, that no one's calling an emergency, and that unfortunately has accelerated due to the focus on the pandemic and people not going to their doctors and doing the type of routine care and screening that they should have been doing. So I don't think, at least in my mind, one life is extremely important, especially to the people who are that person's loved ones. But that's the end of the line for all of us, right? That's all of our destination.
Yeah, I hear you, and we could go back and forth on this one for a while. To me, the thing is, like, we still have something to manage here. There are obviously lots of risks in life. I don't think that, for example, in the example of cancer, we're in a scenario where if the public changes their behavior drastically against recommendations, we would overwhelm hospital capacity, and people who had cancer would not be able to receive services.
Right.
And so that's sort of where I'm still in this definition of an emergency to be managed rather than
Also-
just an issue to be handled.
Yeah, and I'd also like to say that I think that, and this is never lost on me, that, you know, the flu death, and I don't know exactly what it was, but I know that our flu season was radically below what it normally is. And most people attribute that to the care that we took in the face of COVID. And while it's not necessarily directly proportional, the methods of transmission are similar. And so who knows what would have happened had we not done all the things that we did, in which case, if it were a proportional increase similar to the reduction in the flu, that it increased COVID deaths as an example, then it would have completely overwhelmed and been beyond those other two sources. And I am aware that cancer and heart disease, because we all do have to die of something eventually, are the kinds of things we ultimately die of in the greatest numbers. And because everybody's got to die. You know, the last thing that happens is your heart stops beating, you know, so, you know, obviously hearts take out people at the end in large quantities. But this was a special thing that was new, and in only a year with everything that we did, it still took out 500,000 people in a year, which is, you know, 15 to 20 times cars and guns and things like that, and approached cancer and heart disease in 1 year as an anomaly with all the stuff that we put in place to try to prevent it. So I'd like to, you know, I'd like to say that the things that we did across the country, at least in this country, you know, might have saved a couple million. Who knows? Nobody knows for sure. We know we worked at it and we know we're getting out of it.
Okay, so I understand direction from the board. We will bring a resolution back next week for consideration and adoption, extending the public health order. Excuse me, extending the emergency declaration order.
Sounds good to me. So then any other words on this from anyone or? Okay, that was the last item on our agenda. I don't believe we have anything else for executive session. Okay, we are adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.